Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Mariah stood at the altar in a cream-colored dress that hugged her curves just right, her dark skin glowing under the soft chapel lights in downtown Portland. Her hands trembled as she gripped the small bouquet of white roses, her heart hammering so loud she could barely hear the preacher's words. Across from her stood Gregory Carmichael, 52 years old, salt and pepper beard perfectly trimmed, wearing a navy suit that made his blue eyes pop like ocean water. He smiled at her with the kind of tenderness that made her knees weak. But in the third row, sitting stiff as a corpse, was Delilah, her best friend since 5th grade, the girl who used to share her lunch money and secrets. The girl whose father Mariah was about to marry. Delilah's face was stone cold, her arms crossed tight over her chest, her eyes burning holes into Mariah's soul. The look said everything. You betrayed me. You're dead to me. I'll never forgive you. Mariah's throat tightened. She wanted to run, to scream, to explain that this wasn't some sick plan. But Gregory squeezed her hand and she looked back at him. This man who had saved her when she had nothing, who had seen her when she was invisible, who had loved her when the world told her she wasn't worth loving. The preacher asked if anyone objected to this union. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Mariah held her breath, waiting for Delilah to stand up and shout, to call her a homewrecker, a snake, a traitor, but Delilah just sat there. Her jaw clenched so tight Mariah thought she might crack a tooth. Then, without a word, Delilah stood up. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just walked out of the chapel, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. The door slammed behind her and the sound echoed through the room like a death sentence. Mariah's chest felt like it was caving in. Gregory leaned in close and whispered, "She'll come around, I promise." But Mariah knew better. She had lost her best friend, maybe forever. And as the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Mariah couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or maybe it was the only decision that ever made sense. But to understand how a 24-year-old black woman ended up marrying her best friend's 52-year-old white father, you have to go back. Back to the summer when everything started to fall apart. Back to the moment Mariah realized that survival blues wasn't just about staying alive. It was about choosing who you were willing to become. Back to the day she moved into the Carmichael house and saw Gregory not as Delilah's dad, but as a man who noticed her in ways no one else ever had. Back to the night she crossed a line she never thought she'd cross. And back to the secret that would either destroy them all or set them free. Because this story didn't start with a wedding. It started with a lie. A desperate, broken, beautiful lie that turned into something nobody could have predicted. Not even Mariah herself. The chapel was emptying now. Guests filing out with tight smiles and awkward congratulations. Mariah could feel their judgment like a second skin. She knew what they were thinking. Gold digger, homewrecker, girl with daddy issues. Let them think whatever they wanted. They didn't know what it felt like to be 19 and homeless, sleeping on a friend's couch because your mother chose her boyfriend over you. They didn't know what it felt like to watch Delilah's perfect life from the outside, wishing just once that someone would look at you like you mattered. They didn't know what it felt like when Gregory Carmichael, the man who had every reason to ignore you, sat down beside you in his kitchen at 2 a.m. and asked, "Are you okay?" In a voice so gentle it cracked something inside you. They didn't know. So Mariah lifted her chin, took Gregory's hand, and walked out of that chapel like she owned the world. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. She was seen, she was chosen, and she was about to fight like hell to keep it. Outside, The Portland rain was falling soft and steady, washing the streets clean. Gregory opened an umbrella and pulled Mariah close, shielding her from the storm. She looked up at him, this man who had flipped her entire world upside down, and felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. But as they walked toward the car, Mariah glanced back at the chapel one last time. Through the rain-streaked window, she saw Delilah standing alone inside, staring at the empty altar. Her face was wet, but Mariah couldn't tell if it was tears or just the rain. And in that moment, Mariah understood the truth. Love always costs something, and sometimes the price is the person you thought would stand by you forever. Mariah turned away and got into the car, leaving her old life behind. She didn't know it yet, but the real storm was just beginning. Mariah was 19 when she first walked through the doors of the Carmichael house in the hills of West Lynn, Oregon. It was one of those massive houses you see in magazines, floor-to-ceiling windows, a driveway that curved like a river, and a front lawn so green it didn't look real. Delilah had been bragging about it since middle school, but Mariah had never actually visited. Her own mama barely kept the lights on in their cramped apartment in Southeast Portland, so stepping into this house felt like entering another dimension. Delilah grabbed her hand and pulled her inside, squealing about some boy from their criminology class. Mariah smiled and nodded, but her eyes were scanning the marble floors, the chandelier hanging in the entryway, the family photos lining the walls. In every picture, Delilah was front and center. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect life. And standing behind her in most of the photos was Gregory Carmichael, tall, broad-shouldered, with kind eyes that seemed to carry a sadness Mariah couldn't quite name. She had heard about him before. Delilah's dad, the successful architect, the man who built half of Portland's skyline, but she had never seen him in person. Until that afternoon. Mariah was in the kitchen grabbing a soda when he walked in, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, looking like he had just come from a long meeting. He stopped when he saw her, and for a second they just stared at each other. "You must be Mariah," he said, his voice deep and warm like bourbon. "Delilah talks about you all the time." Mariah nodded, suddenly feeling like her clothes were too cheap, her hair too wild, her presence too out of place. But Gregory didn't look at her like that. He looked at her like she belonged. "Make yourself at home," he said, grabbing a glass of water. "And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Then he left, and Mariah stood there feeling something she couldn't name. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was something quieter, something dangerous. It was the feeling of being seen. For the first time in her life, someone looked at her and didn't see a charity case, a broke girl from the hood, or a sidekick to someone more important. Gregory Carmichael saw her, and that tiny moment of recognition planted a seed that would grow into something neither of them could control. But Mariah didn't have time to think about Gregory. She was too busy trying to survive. Her mama had kicked her out 2 weeks earlier after Mariah refused to lie to the cops about her mama's boyfriend, who had been selling stolen electronics out of their apartment. Mariah had told the truth, and her mama chose him over her own daughter. Just like that, Mariah was homeless. She had been sleeping on couches in her car, sometimes in the library, until they kicked her out at closing time. Delilah didn't know. Mariah hadn't told her. How do you explain to your rich best friend that you don't have a home anymore? How do you admit that while she's worried about what dress to wear to a party, you're worried about where you'll sleep tonight? So Mariah kept her mouth shut and smiled through the pain. She stayed at Delilah's house as much as possible, pretending she had somewhere else to go. And for a while, it worked. Until the night everything changed. It was late, almost midnight. Delilah had passed out after a bottle of cheap wine, sprawled across her king-size bed like she didn't have a care in the world. Mariah was on the floor in a sleeping bag, staring at the ceiling, trying not to cry. She was so tired of pretending, tired of being strong, tired of feeling like she didn't matter. She got up quietly and went downstairs to get some water. The house was dark, except for a dim light coming from the kitchen. When she walked in, she found Gregory sitting at the island, a glass of whiskey in front of him, staring at nothing. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. "Can't sleep?" he asked finally. Mariah shook her head. "Me neither," he said, gesturing to the stool beside him. "Sit, keep me company." And that's how it started. Two broken people sitting in a dark kitchen, talking about everything and nothing. Gregory told her about his late wife, Delilah's mother, who had died of cancer 3 years earlier. He told her about the loneliness that followed, the way the house felt too big and too empty. Mariah told him about her mama, about being kicked out, about feeling invisible. And for the first time in months, she cried. Really cried. Gregory didn't judge her, he just listened. When Mariah finally wiped her eyes and looked up, Gregory was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You're staying here," he said. "It wasn't a question, it was a decision." Mariah blinked. "What?" "You're staying here," he repeated. "I'm not letting you go back to sleeping in your car. Delilah's got a guest room she never uses. It's yours." Mariah opened her mouth to argue, to say she didn't need charity, but the words died in her throat, because the truth was she did need help. She was drowning and Gregory was throwing her a lifeline. "Thank you," she whispered. Gregory nodded and stood up, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not invisible, Mariah. Don't ever think that." Then he walked upstairs, leaving Mariah alone in the kitchen with a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. It was something else, something she would spend the next 5 years trying to deny. But that night, in the quiet darkness of the Carmichael house, Mariah felt something shift, and she knew, deep down, that nothing would ever be the same. Moving into the Carmichael house was like stepping into a dream Mariah didn't know she was allowed to have. The guest room was bigger than her old apartment, with a queen-sized bed, a walk-in closet, and a window that overlooked the backyard where deer sometimes wandered through at dawn. Delilah was thrilled at first, calling it an extended sleepover, planning movie nights and late-night talks like they were kids at summer camp. But Mariah could feel the shift almost immediately. It was subtle at first, the way Delilah would forget to invite her to certain outings, the way she'd roll her eyes when Mariah asked to borrow something, the way she'd make little comments about Mariah taking advantage of her dad's kindness. Mariah tried to brush it off, tried to convince herself that Delilah was just stressed about school or boys or whatever rich girls stressed about. But deep down, she knew the truth. Delilah was starting to resent her. And Mariah couldn't even blame her, because living in someone else's house, eating someone else's food, wearing someone else's generosity like a coat you didn't pay for, it changes things. It makes you small. It makes you grateful in a way that feels like owing. But Gregory never made her feel that way. Every morning he'd leave a fresh cup of coffee on the counter with a note, "Have a good day, Em." Every evening he'd ask her about her classes, her goals, her dreams. He treated her like she mattered, like her presence in his home wasn't a burden, but a gift. And Mariah found herself looking forward to those moments more than she should. She'd catch herself watching him when he didn't know she was looking, the way he'd roll up his sleeves when he was working on blueprints, the way his laugh sounded like distant thunder, the way he'd run his hand through his hair when he was frustrated. She told herself it was just admiration, just gratitude. But late at night, when she was alone in her room, she'd replay their conversations and feel a pull in her chest. She couldn't explain. It was wrong. She knew it was wrong. Gregory was 50 years old. He was Delilah's father. He was grieving his dead wife. And Mariah was just a broke college student with nowhere else to go. But the heart doesn't care about logic. It just wants what it wants. The tension between Mariah and Delilah finally exploded one night in the middle of their sophomore year. They were getting ready for a party, and Delilah was trying on outfit after outfit, tossing clothes across the room like a tornado. Mariah was sitting on the bed, scrolling through her phone, trying to ignore the mess. "Which one?" Delilah asked, holding up two nearly identical dresses. Mariah barely looked up. "The black one," Delilah huffed. "You always say the black one." "Because you always look good in black," Mariah said, still not looking up. Delilah threw the dresses on the bed and crossed her arms. "You know, it's kind of annoying how you just sit there and don't even try. Like, I'm over here stressing about what to wear and you just throw on whatever and still look good." Mariah finally looked up, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about you," Delilah snapped. "You act all humble and grateful, but you're living in my house, eating my food, wearing my clothes, and you don't even seem to care." Mariah felt her stomach drop. "I care, Delilah. I'm grateful every single day." "Then why does it feel like you're taking over my life?" Delilah shot back, her voice rising. "My dad talks about you more than he talks about me. You're always in the kitchen with him, always laughing at his jokes. It's like you're trying to replace my mom or something." The words hit Mariah like a slap. She stood up, her hands shaking. "That's not fair. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I'm just trying to survive." Delilah's eyes were cold. "Well, maybe you should survive somewhere else." The silence that followed was deafening. Mariah grabbed her jacket and walked out of the room, her chest tight with anger and hurt. She didn't know where she was going, just anywhere that wasn't there. She ended up in the backyard, sitting on the porch steps, staring at the stars and trying not to cry. She heard the door open behind her, and she didn't have to turn around to know it was Gregory. He sat down beside her, not saying anything at first, just existing in the quiet. "She didn't mean it," he said finally. Mariah shook her head. "Yes, she did." Gregory sighed. "She's angry, but not at you. She's angry at the world, at me, at her mother for leaving. She just doesn't know how to say it." Mariah looked at him, and in the moonlight, his face looked softer, sadder. "I don't want to cause problems between you two," she said. "You're not," Gregory said firmly. "You're just easy to blame, but that's not your fault." They sat in silence for a while, and then Gregory said something that changed everything. "You remind me of her, my wife. Not in looks, but in spirit. She had this way of seeing the world, like everything was worth fighting for. You have that too." Mariah's heart stuttered. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what?" "For being here. For complicating things." Gregory turned to her, his eyes intense. "Don't apologize for existing, Mariah. You deserve to be here just as much as anyone else." And in that moment, something snapped into place. Mariah looked at Gregory, really looked at him, and saw not Delilah's dad, not a man twice her age, but someone who saw her, who valued her, who made her feel like she was enough. And when he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering just a second too long, Mariah didn't pull away. She should have. She knew she should have, but she didn't. Because for once in her life, she wanted to be selfish. She wanted to take something just for herself, even if it was wrong, even if it would cost her everything. Gregory pulled his hand back, clearing his throat, breaking the spell. "You should get some sleep," he said, standing up. "Big day tomorrow." Mariah nodded, but she didn't move. She just sat there watching him walk back into the house and felt the weight of what had just happened settle over her like a blanket she couldn't shake off. She had crossed a line, maybe not physically, but emotionally, and there was no going back. The next morning, Mariah woke up to a text from Delilah. "I'm sorry. I was drunk and stupid. Love you." Mariah texted back, "Love you too." But it was a lie, because love was starting to mean something different now. And Mariah wasn't sure she could stop it. The next 2 years passed in a blur of stolen glances, late-night conversations, and attention so thick Mariah could taste it every time she walked into a room where Gregory was. She buried herself in school, graduating with a degree in social work, while Delilah bounced from major to major, never quite finding her footing. Delilah spent more and more time out of the house, partying, traveling, dating men who treated her like an accessory. She barely noticed when Mariah started staying home more, barely noticed when her dad started smiling again, barely noticed the way the air shifted when Mariah and Gregory were in the same room. Or maybe she did notice. Maybe she just didn't want to see it, because seeing it would mean admitting that something was happening that she couldn't control, and Delilah hated not being in control. Mariah, on the other hand, was drowning in guilt. Every time Gregory's hand brushed hers when he passed her a plate, every time their eyes locked across the dinner table, every time he asked her to stay up and watch a movie with him, she felt like she was betraying Delilah. But she couldn't stop. She was addicted to the feeling of being wanted, of being chosen, of being more than just the broke girl who needed saving. It all came to a head one night after Delilah's 23rd birthday party. The house was trashed. Empty bottles everywhere, strangers passed out on the couch, music still thumping from a Bluetooth speaker someone forgot to turn off. Mariah had spent the night cleaning up, picking up red Solo cups and wiping down counters while Delilah slept off her hangover upstairs. Gregory came home late from a work dinner, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. He stopped when he saw Mariah in the kitchen, scrubbing at a wine stain on the counter. "You don't have to do that," he said, his voice tired. "I know," Mariah said, not looking up, "but I wanted to." Gregory walked over and took the sponge from her hand. "Go to bed, Mariah. You've done enough." But Mariah didn't move. She just stood there, looking at him, and for the first time, she didn't try to hide what she was feeling. "Why are you so good to me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gregory froze. "What?" "You don't owe me anything," Mariah said. "But you treat me like I matter, like I'm more than just some charity case." "Why?" Gregory set the sponge down and ran a hand through his hair. "Because you do matter, because you're smart and kind, and you deserve someone to see that." Mariah felt tears prick her eyes. "Delilah thinks I'm trying to replace her mom." Gregory's jaw tightened. "Delilah doesn't know what she's talking about." "Then what am I to you?" Mariah asked, her voice breaking. "Because I need to know. I need to know if I'm losing my mind or if you feel it too." The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Gregory stared at her, his expression unreadable, and Mariah felt her heart hammering in her chest. She had just laid everything on the table. There was no taking it back now. Finally, Gregory spoke. "You're not losing your mind." Mariah's breath caught. "Then what is this?" Gregory stepped closer, so close she could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gray in his beard. "This is me, trying not to fall in love with a woman half my age who happens to be my daughter's best friend," he said, his voice rough. "This is me failing miserably." Mariah felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. "Gregory!" "I know it's wrong." He cut her off. "I know all the reasons this can't happen, but I can't stop thinking about you, Mariah, and I hate myself for it." Mariah reached out and took his hand, her fingers trembling. "I think about you too." And then, as if pulled by a force neither of them could resist, Gregory leaned down and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, like he was asking permission. But when Mariah kissed him back, it turned desperate, hungry, like they were both starving and had finally found food. Mariah's hands tangled in his hair, his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The world disappeared. There was no Delilah, no guilt, no age gap, no consequences. There was just this. Two people who had been circling each other for years finally giving in. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Gregory rested his forehead against hers. "We can't do this," he said, but his hands were still on her waist. "I know," Mariah whispered, but neither of them let go. They stood there in the kitchen holding each other like lifelines, knowing they had just crossed a line they could never uncross. And upstairs, Delilah slept, completely unaware that her world was about to shatter. The next morning, Mariah woke up in her own bed, fully clothed, with the memory of Gregory's kiss burned into her mind. She didn't know what happened next. She didn't know if they would talk about it or pretend it never happened. But when she walked downstairs and found a note on the counter, "We need to talk. Meet me at Powell's Books at 3 p.m. Gee, she knew that whatever came next would change everything. 3 o'clock, Mariah stood outside Powell's Books in downtown Portland, her heart racing. Gregory was already there, leaning against the brick wall, his hands in his pockets. When he saw her, he didn't smile. He just nodded toward the door. "Let's walk." They walked in silence through the stacks of books, the smell of old pages and coffee filling the air. Finally, Gregory stopped in a quiet corner and turned to face her. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest," he said. "Okay. Do you want this? Really want this? Or are you just looking for someone to save you?" Mariah met his eyes. "I'm not looking to be saved, Gregory. I'm looking to be loved. And I think you are too." Gregory's expression softened. "If we do this, we lose her. You know that, right? Delilah will never forgive us." Mariah's chest tightened, but she nodded. "I know." Gregory reached out and took her hand. "Then let's not waste any more time pretending this isn't real." And just like that, the decision was made. They were going to be together, consequence to be damned, but neither of them realized just how high the cost would be. Because Delilah wasn't just angry, she was vindictive, and she was about to make sure Mariah paid for every stolen moment, every secret kiss, every betrayal. The war was just beginning. For 6 months, Mariah and Gregory lived in a beautiful, terrifying secret. They moved like ghosts around each other when Delilah was home, keeping their distance, speaking in polite tones, acting like nothing had changed. But the moment Delilah left, for class, for a night out, for one of her spontaneous weekend trips, the house transformed into something else entirely. Gregory would pull Mariah into his arms the second the door closed, kissing her like he'd been holding his breath underwater and she was oxygen. They'd cook dinner together, dance in the kitchen to old jazz records, fall asleep on the couch with Mariah's head on his chest and his fingers tangled in her hair. It was stolen time, borrowed happiness, and Mariah knew it couldn't last. But God felt. It felt good. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. Gregory made her laugh, made her think, made her believe she was worthy of something real. He didn't treat her like a project or a charity case. He treated her like an equal, like someone whose opinions mattered, whose dreams were worth chasing. He helped her apply for grad school, edited her essays, celebrated when she got accepted into a master's program in social work at Portland State. He was proud of her. And that pride filled a hole in Mariah's heart she didn't even know existed. But the lies were eating her alive. Every time Delilah hugged her, every time she called Mariah her best friend, every time she complained about her dad being so old and boring, Mariah felt like she was drowning in guilt. She wanted to tell the truth. She wanted to scream it from the rooftops. But Gregory kept saying, "Not yet. She's not ready." Mariah didn't know if Delilah would ever be ready. How do you tell your best friend that you're in love with her father? How do you explain that it's not some creepy power dynamic or daddy issue situation, but something real and deep and terrifying? Mariah didn't have the words. So she stayed silent, and the secret grew heavier every day. Then, one night, everything almost fell apart. Delilah came home early from a date, slamming the front door so hard the walls shook. Mariah and Gregory were in the living room, his arm around her shoulder, her legs tucked under her, watching some documentary about urban planning. The second they heard the door, they jumped apart like they'd been electrocuted. Mariah grabbed a throw pillow and pretended to be engrossed in her phone. Gregory stood up and walked toward the entryway. "How was your night?" he asked casually. Delilah stormed into the living room, her mascara smudged, her face red. "Men are trash," she announced, throwing her purse on the couch. "Every single one of them." Gregory sighed. "What happened?" "He said I was too high maintenance," Delilah said, her voice breaking. "Can you believe that he took me to some dive bar and got mad when I said I didn't want to drink?" beer out of a can, like, sorry, I have standards. Mariah wanted to say something comforting, but the word stuck in her throat because all she could think about was the fact that she was sleeping with Delilah's dad. She was the definition of betrayal. Delilah collapsed on the couch next to Mariah, tears streaming down her face. "Why can't I find someone like you, Dad?" she said, looking at Gregory. "Someone who actually gives a damn." Gregory shifted uncomfortably. "You will, sweetheart. You just have to be patient." "I'm tired of being patient," Delilah said, wiping her eyes. "I want what Mom had. I want someone who looks at me the way you looked at her." The room went silent. Mariah felt like she might throw up. Gregory cleared his throat. "You'll find it," he said quietly. "I promise." Delilah nodded and stood up. "I'm going to bed. Thanks for listening." She hugged her dad, then turned to Mariah. "Love you, girl." "Love you too," Mariah whispered. And then Delilah was gone, her footsteps echoing up the stairs. The second her bedroom door closed, Gregory sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. "We can't keep doing this," he said. Mariah's heart dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this secret is going to destroy us," Gregory said, looking at her with anguish in his eyes. "It's destroying you. I can see it." Mariah shook her head. I'm fine." "You're not fine," Gregory said. "You're carrying a weight you shouldn't have to carry, and it's my fault." "No," Mariah said firmly. "It's not your fault. This is my choice. I chose you." "Then let me do the right thing," Gregory said. "Let me tell her. Let me take the hit." Mariah grabbed his hand. "She'll hate us both no matter who tells her, but if we're going to do this, we do it together." Gregory stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Together." They decided to wait until after Delilah's graduation. It was only 3 months away, 3 more months of lying, of sneaking around, of pretending, but they could do it. They had to, because the alternative, losing each other, was unthinkable, but fate had other plans. 2 weeks later, Delilah found the receipts. Gregory had taken Mariah to a bed and breakfast in Cannon Beach for her birthday. It was supposed to be a weekend trip, just the two of them, away from the lies and the guilt. They had told Delilah that Gregory was at a work conference and Mariah was visiting a friend in Seattle. It was a stupid lie, a careless lie, and it fell apart in seconds. Delilah had been looking for her dad's credit card to buy textbooks, and she found the receipts in his office drawer. 2 hotel rooms booked under his name, romantic dinners at seaside restaurants, wine tastings, couples massage. The dates matched the weekend they were both supposedly out of town. Delilah wasn't stupid. She put the pieces together. And when Mariah and Gregory walked through the front door on Sunday night, laughing and windswept and happy, Delilah was waiting. She was sitting on the couch in the dark, the receipts spread out on the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. When Gregory flipped on the light and saw her, his face went white. "Delilah, don't," Delilah said, her voice eerily calm. "Don't you dare lie to me." Mariah felt her stomach twist into knots. This was it, the moment they had been dreading, the moment everything came crashing down. Delilah stood up, her eyes cold and hard. "How long?" she asked. Neither of them answered. "How long?" Delilah screamed. "A year," Gregory said quietly. "A little over a year." Delilah let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "A year. You've been screwing my best friend for a year, under my roof, behind my back, and you didn't think I deserved to know?" Mariah stepped forward. "Delilah, please." "Don't," Delilah said, holding up a hand. "Don't you dare say my name. You don't get to call me your friend anymore. You're dead to me, both of you." And with that, Delilah grabbed her keys and walked out the door, leaving Mariah and Gregory standing in the wreckage of their secret, wondering if love was ever worth this much pain. Delilah didn't come home that night, or the next, or the one after that. She moved in with her boyfriend of the month, some trust fund kid named Ashton who drove a Tesla and talked about cryptocurrency like it was a religion. Gregory called her every day, texted her, begged her to come home so they could talk. She ignored every message. Mariah tried too, sending long paragraphs explaining herself, apologizing, pleading for a chance to make things right. Delilah blocked her number. It was like Delilah had erased them both from her life with the efficiency of deleting an app she no longer needed. And the silence was louder than any scream. The house felt haunted. Gregory threw himself into work, staying late at the office, taking on projects he didn't need, anything to avoid the emptiness that filled every room. Mariah tried to focus on grad school, but her mind kept drifting. She'd see something funny and think, I have to tell Delilah, before remembering that Delilah wasn't hers to tell anymore. She'd scroll through old photos on her phone, pictures of them at concerts, at brunch, making stupid faces in photo booths, and feel like she was mourning a death, because in a way, she was. The Delilah she knew, the girl who had shared her secrets and defended her and called her sister, was gone. And in her place was a stranger who hated her. 3 weeks after the blow-up, Delilah finally came back to the house, but not to reconcile. She came to pack her things. Mariah was in her room when she heard the front door open, heard Delilah's footsteps on the stairs, quick and purposeful. She stepped into the hallway and saw Delilah dragging suitcases into her bedroom, her face set in a mask of cold determination. Delilah, Mariah said softly. Delilah didn't even look at her. She just kept packing, shoving clothes into bags like she was trying to erase every trace of her existence from this house. Can we please talk? Mariah asked, her voice breaking. There's nothing to talk about, Delilah said flatly. You made your choice. Now live with it. I never wanted to hurt you, Mariah said, tears streaming down her face. I swear I never... Delilah finally turned to face her, and the look in her eyes was pure venom. You took everything from me, my best friend, my dad, my home, and you have the audacity to stand there and tell me you didn't want to hurt me? Mariah flinched. It wasn't like that. It just happened. We tried to fight it, but you didn't try hard enough, Delilah spat. You could have left. You could have moved out, but you stayed because you wanted this. You wanted my life, and now you have it. Congratulations. Mariah felt like she'd been slapped. I know. That's not true. I never wanted your life. I just wanted what? Delilah interrupted. A father figure? Someone to pay your bills? A roof over your head? I wanted to be loved, Mariah shouted, her voice cracking. I wanted someone to see me and not just feel sorry for me. And your dad didn't it? He saw me, he chose me, and I'm sorry that hurt you, but I'm not sorry I fell in love with him. Delilah stared at her, and for a moment Mariah thought she saw something soften in her eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold fury. You're pathetic, Delilah said quietly. And when he gets tired of you, and he will, you'll have nothing. No friends, no family, just an old man who felt sorry for you. The words cut deeper than anything Delilah had said before. Mariah opened her mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Delilah grabbed her bags and walked past her, not even looking back. Tell my dad I'll come back for the rest of my stuff when he's not here, she said. And Mariah, don't ever contact me again. And then she was gone. The front door slammed and the house fell silent. Mariah sank to the floor in the hallway, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. She had known this would happen. She had known Delilah would hate her, but knowing it and living it were two different things, and now she had to figure out how to keep going when it felt like she had lost everything. Gregory found her there an hour later, curled up on the floor, her eyes red and swollen. He didn't say anything. He just sat down beside her and pulled her into his arms. She hates me, Mariah whispered. I know, Gregory said, his voice thick with emotion. She hates me too. Was it worth it? Mariah asked, looking up at him. Am I worth losing your daughter? Gregory cupped her face in his hands, his eyes fierce. Yes, you are worth it. And one day she'll understand, maybe not today, maybe not for years, but one day she'll see that love doesn't follow rules, and when she does, she'll come back. Mariah wanted to believe him, but deep down she wasn't sure. because Delilah had always been stubborn, always been unforgiving, and Mariah had just committed the ultimate betrayal. There was no coming back from that, but Gregory was here. He was choosing her over and over, even when it cost him everything, and that had to mean something. So Mariah wiped her tears, took a shaky breath, and decided to fight. For this love, for this life, for the chance to prove that she was more than just a girl who stole her best friend's dad. She was a woman who knew what she wanted, and she wasn't letting go. Over the next few months, Mariah and Gregory built a life together. They stopped hiding. They went on dates in public, held hands in grocery stores, kissed in parking lots. People stared, people whispered, but they didn't care. Mariah graduated from her master's program with honors, got a job at a nonprofit helping homeless youth, and started to build her own identity outside of Gregory's shadow. She wasn't just the girl living with the Carmichaels anymore. She was Mariah Collins' social worker, advocate, survivor, and she was in love with a man who saw her, who valued her, who made her believe she was enough. Gregory proposed on a random Tuesday in the middle of their kitchen. No fancy dinner, no grand gesture. Just him, getting down on one knee while she was making scrambled eggs, holding a simple gold band and asking her to marry him. Mariah said yes before he even finished the question. They set a date 6 months away, enough time to plan, but not so long that they'd lose their nerve. They sent an invitation to Delilah. She didn't respond. But on the day of the wedding, when Mariah stood at the altar and saw Delilah sitting in that pew, stone-faced but present, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning of something new, something complicated and messy and painful, but real. And as Mariah said, "I do," and kissed her husband in front of God and everyone, she made herself a promise. She would never stop fighting for Delilah's forgiveness, even if it took forever, because family, real family, is worth fighting for. Being Gregory Carmichael's wife was nothing like Mariah imagined. She thought marriage would erase the guilt, silence the whispers, prove to the world that what they had was real. But the judgment followed her everywhere. At the nonprofit where she worked, co-workers smiled to her face and gossiped behind her back. She'd overhear fragments, gold digger, daddy issues, home wrecker, and pretend she didn't care. But every word was a blade. Gregory tried to shield her from it, but he couldn't. People looked at them in restaurants, their eyes calculating the age gap, making assumptions. 28 years. That's how many years separated them. Mariah was 24 when they got married. Gregory was 52. On paper, it looked predatory. In reality, it was the most equal partnership Mariah had ever known. Gregory didn't control her or diminish her. He supported her dreams, challenged her ideas, and treated her like the intelligent, capable woman she was. But the world didn't see that. The world saw a young black woman who married a wealthy white man twice her age, and they wrote their own story about who she was. Mariah learned to live with it. She had to, because the alternative was giving up the one person who made her feel like she belonged somewhere. But the hardest part wasn't the strangers. It was Delilah. After the wedding, Delilah went completely dark. No calls, no texts, no acknowledgement that Mariah or Gregory existed. She moved to Seattle, got a job at some tech startup, and built a life that didn't include either of them. Gregory tried to reach out on holidays, on her birthday, on random Tuesdays. When the missing her became too much, Delilah never responded. Mariah wrote letters, actual handwritten letters, pouring her heart out, apologizing, explaining, begging for a chance to make things right. She never sent them. What was the point? Delilah had made her choice, and Mariah had to accept it, but accepting it didn't make it hurt any less. She'd see something that reminded her of Delilah, a song they used to love, a TV show they'd binge watch together, an inside joke nobody else would understand, and the grief would hit her all over again. She had traded her best friend for her husband. And some days, she wondered if she'd made the right choice. But then Gregory would come home from work, pull her into his arms, and remind her why she'd chosen this life, because love, real, soul deep, I choose you everyday love was rare, and Mariah wasn't letting it go. Not for anyone, not even for Delilah. 10 months into their marriage, Mariah found out she was pregnant. She stood in the bathroom of their home in Lake Oswego. They'd moved out of the Westland house because it held too many ghosts, staring at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. Her hands were shaking. She was 25 years old, still building her career, still figuring out who she was. And now, she was going to be a mother. When she told Gregory, his reaction was immediate and overwhelming. He cried, actually cried, big silent tears rolling down his face as he held her and whispered, "We're having a baby." Mariah had expected hesitation, worry, maybe even fear. Gregory was 53. He'd already raised a child. He'd already done the diapers and the sleepless nights and the parent-teacher conferences. But instead of dread, she saw joy, pure, unfiltered joy. "Are you sure you want this?" Mariah asked, searching his face. "I mean, you're already old," Gregory finished, smiling through his tears. "Yeah, I'm old, but I'm also in love, and I want this with you more than anything." Mariah exhaled, and for the first time since seeing those 2 pink lines, she let herself feel it. Excitement, hope, the terrifying, beautiful possibility of creating a life with the man she loved. But underneath it all was a sadness she couldn't shake, because she wanted to tell Delilah. She wanted to share this news with her best friend, wanted to squeal and freak out and plan baby showers together like they used to plan everything. But Delilah was gone, and Mariah had to learn how to celebrate without her. The pregnancy was rough. Mariah spent the first trimester throwing up every morning, exhausted by noon, and crying at random commercials by night. Gregory was patient, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, rubbing her feet, reading parenting books like he was studying for a PhD. But there was a tension in the house that neither of them talked about, because they both knew who should be here, who should be excited and nosy and planning the nursery. Delilah. Mariah finally broke down one night in her second trimester. She and Gregory were painting the nursery soft yellow walls because they didn't want to know the baby's sex yet, and she just started crying. Not the quiet, dignified tears she usually allowed herself, but ugly, gut-wrenching sobs that made her whole body shake. Gregory put down the paintbrush and pulled her close. "What is it?" he asked, though they both knew. "I miss her," Mariah choked out. "I miss my best friend. I miss the person who was supposed to be here for this." Gregory didn't have an answer. He just held her while she cried, and when she was done, he said the only thing he could say. "Do you want me to try again? To reach out?" Mariah shook her head. "She doesn't want to hear from us." "Maybe she needs to see what she's missing," Gregory said quietly. And that's when Mariah had an idea. It was risky, maybe even cruel, but she had to try. One more time. She had to give Delilah the chance to be part of their lives, or to walk away for good. So she wrote one last letter. "Dear Delilah, I know you don't want to hear from me, or I know I'm the last person you want in your life, but I need to tell you something, and after this I promise I'll leave you alone. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. And I wanted you to know, because no matter what happened between us, you were my sister. You were the person I shared everything with. And I hate that you're not here for this. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to be happy for me. I'm just asking you to know, because you deserve to know, that your dad is going to be a father again. And whether you're in his life or not, he loves you. He misses you every single day. And so do I. If you want to meet your sibling when they're born, the door's always open. If you don't, I'll understand. But I had to give you the choice. Love always, Mariah." She sent the letter to Delilah's Seattle address, the one Gregory had found through some old mail, and then she waited. Days passed, then weeks, then months, no response. Mariah gave birth to a baby boy in the middle of a rainy April night. They named him Carter James Carmichael. He had Mariah's eyes and Gregory's stubborn chin, and he was perfect. Gregory held him like he was made of glass, tears streaming down his face, whispering promises about the kind of father he'd be. Mariah watched them and felt her heart crack open in a way she didn't know was possible. This was her family now. This tiny, messy, beautiful family, and it was enough. It had to be enough. But 3 days after they brought Carter home from the hospital, the doorbell rang. Mariah was exhausted, her body still healing, her emotions all over the place. Gregory answered the door, and there, standing on their porch with a baby gift wrapped in blue paper, was Delilah. She looked older, harder, like the last 2 years had stripped away some essential softness, but she was there. "Can I come in?" Delilah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gregory stepped aside without a word, and Mariah, holding her newborn son in the living room, felt hope flicker back to life for the first time in 2 years. Delilah stood in the living room doorway like she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross the threshold. Her eyes landed on Mariah, then dropped to the baby in her arms. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The silence was heavy, loaded with 2 years of anger and hurt and unspoken words. Finally, Delilah cleared her throat. "He's beautiful," she said, her voice tight. Mariah nodded, her grip on Carter tightening instinctively. "Thank you. What's his name?" Delilah asked. "Carter," Gregory said from behind her. "Carter James." Delilah flinched at the middle name. James had been her grandfather's name, Gregory's father. It was a family name, and by using it, Gregory and Mariah were claiming Carter as part of that legacy, part of the Carmichael line, whether Delilah liked it or not. "Can I hold him?" Delilah asked, and Mariah's breath caught. She wanted to say no, wanted to protect her son from the woman who had called her pathetic and dead to her, but she also saw something in Delilah's eyes, something vulnerable and desperate and maybe even sorry. So Mariah stood up slowly and walked over, placing Carter carefully in Delilah's arms. Delilah looked down at the baby and her face crumbled. "He looks like you, Dad," she whispered, and then she started to cry. Not angry tears or bitter tears, but the kind of tears that come from a wound that's been festering for too long. Gregory moved toward her, but Delilah shook her head, holding up a hand to stop him. "I'm not here to forgive you," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm not here to say everything's okay, but I got your letter, Mariah, and I couldn't stay away." They sat down, Mariah on the couch, Delilah in the armchair, with Carter still in her arms, Gregory standing awkwardly by the fireplace, like he didn't know where he fit in this fragile moment. "I've spent 2 years hating you," Delilah said, looking at Mariah. 2 years imagining all the ways I could hurt you back, but when I read that you were pregnant, I realized something. If I keep holding on to this, I lose everything. I lose my dad, I lose my brother, I lose the only friend who ever really knew me. Mariah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Delilah. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." "I know you are," Delilah said, "and I'm sorry too. For the things I said, for the way I left, for shutting you both out." Gregory's voice was rough when he spoke. "You had every right to be angry." Delilah shook her head. "Maybe. But I also could have tried to understand. I could have listened instead of just reacting. I was so caught up in feeling betrayed that I didn't stop to think about what you were going through. You lost Mom, Dad, and I just left you alone with that grief." Gregory's face twisted with emotion. "I never blamed you for that, sweetheart, but I blame myself," Delilah said. "And I think I blame Mariah too, because it was easier to be angry at her than to deal with the fact that you were moving on, that you were happy, that life was happening without Mom." The words hung in the air like a confession. Mariah finally understood. This was never just about her and Gregory. It was about loss, about a daughter who wasn't ready to see her father in love again, about a girl who was still mourning her mother and couldn't handle watching someone else step into that space, even if that space was never meant to be filled the same way. "I'm not trying to replace your mom," Mariah said softly. "I could never do that. She was everything to your dad, and I know I'll always be second to her memory." Gregory shook his head. "That's not..." But Mariah held up a hand. "It's okay. I'm not jealous of her. I'm grateful for her because she loved you, Gregory. And she made you the man I fell in love with. So in a way, I owe her everything." Delilah stared at Mariah, her eyes searching. "Do you really love him? Like, really?" "More than I've ever loved anything," Mariah said without hesitation. "And I know people think I'm with him for money or security or some twisted daddy issue thing. But the truth is, he makes me feel like I matter. Like I'm more than just the broke girl who needed saving. He sees me, Delilah, and that's all I ever wanted." Delilah looked down at Carter, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I see you too," she said quietly. "I always did. I just didn't want to admit it." Mariah's throat tightened. "Does that mean..." "I don't know what it means," Delilah interrupted. "I don't know if we can be friends again. I don't know if I can sit at Thanksgiving dinner and pretend everything's fine. But I know I don't want to keep hating you, and I know I want to be in Carter's life. He's my brother, and he deserves to know his big sister." Gregory let out a breath he'd been holding for 2 years. "That's all I'm asking, Delilah. Just a chance." Delilah nodded, one step at a time. And so they began the slow, painful work of rebuilding. It wasn't easy. Delilah came to visit once a month, always staying for just a few hours, always leaving before things got too comfortable. She and Mariah were polite to each other, but the easy intimacy they'd once shared was gone. They didn't laugh at inside jokes anymore. They didn't finish each other's sentences. They were like strangers learning each other's languages all over again. But they were trying, and that was something. Gregory was cautiously optimistic, but Mariah could see the sadness in his eyes every time Delilah left without hugging him goodbye. Every time she called him Gregory instead of Dad. Every time she kept her distance like she was afraid getting too close would hurt again. Mariah wanted to fix it. She wanted to wave a magic wand and make everything okay, but she was learning that some wounds don't heal quickly. Some relationships have to be rebuilt brick by brick, with time and patience and a whole lot of grace. Carter was the bridge that held them together. Delilah adored him. She brought him gifts, read him books, sang him lullabies, and slowly, in the process of loving her baby brother, Delilah started to soften. She started to smile more, started to let her guard down, started to remember that these people, flawed and complicated and messy as they were still her family. By the time Carter turned 1, Delilah was coming over every week. She'd stay for dinner, help with bath time, fall asleep on the couch while they watched movies. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, still old wounds that hadn't fully healed. But it was progress, and Mariah learned to be grateful for progress. One night, after Carter was asleep and Gregory was in his office working on a project, Delilah and Mariah found themselves alone in the kitchen. They were cleaning up after dinner, moving around each other in a careful dance, when Delilah spoke. "I'm seeing someone," she said. Mariah looked up, surprised. Yeah, Delilah said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "His name is Marcus. He's a software engineer. He's kind, he's patient, and he doesn't think I'm too much." Mariah felt her heart swell. "That's amazing, Delilah. I'm happy for you." Delilah nodded, then paused. "I think I understand now what you and my dad have, because when Marcus looks at me, I feel seen, and I get why you couldn't walk away from that." Mariah set down the dish she was washing and turned to face Delilah fully. "I never wanted to hurt you. You have to know that." "I do," Delilah said, "and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." They stood there in the kitchen, two women who had loved each other and hurt each other and were slowly finding their way back. And then, for the first time in 3 years, Delilah hugged her, really hugged her. Not the stiff, polite hugs they'd been exchanging, but the kind of hug that said, "I forgive you, I missed you, I'm trying." Mariah hugged her back, tears streaming down her face. "I missed you," she whispered. "I missed you too," Delilah whispered back. And in that moment, Mariah felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the fragile, tentative hope she'd been clinging to, but the real thing. The kind of hope that says maybe, just maybe, broken things can be made whole again. 2 years after Carter was born, life had settled into something resembling normal. Mariah was thriving at work, leading a program for at-risk youth that had gained a national recognition. Gregory's firm had won a major contract to redesign Portland's waterfront, and he was busier than ever, but happier than Mariah had seen him in years. Carter was a wild, joyful toddler who loved trucks and dinosaurs and making everyone laugh. And Delilah was back in their lives. Not as she'd been before, but in a new way that was maybe even better. She'd brought Marcus around for dinner, and Gregory had approved with the kind of fatherly gruffness that made Mariah smile. They celebrated holidays together now, took family photos, texted in a group chat about everything and nothing. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old hurts surfaced, when Delilah would make a comment that cut a little too deep, or Mariah would feel the weight of what she'd take, but they were working through it, and Mariah thought they'd made it through the worst of it. She was wrong. The storm came in the form of Gregory's health. It started with fatigue, which they both wrote off as stress from work. Then came the headaches, the dizzy spells, the moments when he'd forget where he put his keys or what he'd been saying mid-sentence. Mariah begged him to see a doctor. Gregory, stubborn as always, insisted he was fine, until the day he collapsed in his office. The diagnosis was a brain tumor. Benign, the doctor said, but growing in a location that made it dangerous. It was pressing on parts of his brain that controlled memory, motor function, balance. They needed to operate. Soon, the news hit like a bomb. Mariah felt like the floor had been ripped out from under her. She was 27 years old with a 2-year-old son and a husband who might not survive surgery. The odds were good, the doctors assured her, but good wasn't guaranteed, and Mariah had learned the hard way that life didn't care about odds. She called Delilah immediately, her voice breaking as she explained what was happening. Delilah didn't hesitate. "I'm coming," she said. "I'll be there tomorrow." And she was. Delilah showed up with Marcus, took charge of Carter, organized meals, coordinated with the doctors, and became the strong, steady presence Mariah desperately needed. For the first time since the betrayal, they worked as a team. Not as awkward acquaintances, not as people walking on eggshells, but as family. The night before Gregory's surgery, Mariah sat by his hospital bed, holding his hand while Carter slept in a cot nearby. Gregory looked older than his 57 years, the hospital gown making him seem fragile in a way Mariah had never seen before. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," Gregory admitted, "but I'm also grateful." "For what?" Mariah asked, her voice thick with tears. "For you, for Carter, for getting a second chance at life when I thought I was done living. You gave me that, Mariah. And no matter what happens tomorrow, I need you to know that you were worth every second of it." Mariah broke down, sobbing into his chest while he held her and whispered that everything would be okay. But she didn't believe him, because the universe had a way of taking things from her just when she thought she'd finally found stability. She'd learned not to trust happiness. It was always temporary. The surgery was scheduled for 8 hours. Mariah, Delilah, and Marcus waited in the surgical waiting room, the minutes stretching into eternities. Mariah couldn't eat, couldn't sit still, couldn't do anything but replay every moment she had with Gregory, cataloging them like precious artifacts she might lose. Delilah sat beside her, holding her hand. "He's going to be okay," she said. "You don't know that," Mariah said, her voice hollow. "No," Delilah admitted, "but I choose to believe it, because the alternative is too painful." Mariah looked at her. This woman who had every reason to let Gregory go, to let karma do its work, to say, "This is what you get for betraying me." But Delilah wasn't saying any of that. She was here, fighting alongside Mariah, refusing to let their family fall apart. "Thank you," Mariah whispered. "For what?" "For being here. For not walking away when you had every right to." Delilah squeezed her hand. "He's my dad, and you're my family. Complicated, messy, painful family, but family." Mariah nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face, and they sat there together, waiting for news that would either save them or destroy them. 8 hours and 42 minutes after Gregory was wheeled into surgery, the doctor finally came out. Mariah shot to her feet, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might explode. The doctor smiled. "He did great. We got the whole tumor and he's stable. He's going to need physical therapy and some time to recover, but the prognosis is excellent." Mariah's knees buckled. Delilah caught her, holding her up while she sobbed with relief. Gregory woke up 2 hours later, groggy and disoriented but alive. Mariah rushed to his side, holding his hand, whispering how much she loved him. Gregory smiled weakly. "Told you I'd be okay," he said, his words slurred. Mariah laughed through her tears. "You're an idiot." "Yeah," Gregory agreed, "but I'm your idiot." Delilah stood in the doorway, watching them, and Mariah saw her wipe her eyes. "Hey, Dad," Delilah said, stepping into the room. Gregory turned his head, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. "Hey, sweetheart, don't ever scare me like that again," Delilah said, her voice breaking. "I'll try," Gregory said. "But no promises. I'm old, remember?" Delilah laughed, a real laugh, and Mariah felt something shift in the room. Something that had been broken was finally starting to heal. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough, and that was all they needed. Gregory's recovery was slow but steady. He spent weeks in physical therapy, relearning how to balance, how to walk without stumbling, how to remember things without getting frustrated. Mariah was by his side every step of the way, along with Delilah, who had taken time off work to help. They became a unit. Mariah, Gregory, Delilah, Marcus, and Carter, navigating this new reality together. And somewhere in the chaos of hospital visits and therapy sessions and sleepless nights, they became a family again. Not the family they'd been before, not the family any of them had imagined, but a family nonetheless. One night after Gregory had been home for a month and was finally starting to feel like himself again, they all gathered for dinner. Mariah cooked lasagna, Gregory's favorite, and they sat around the table laughing and talking and teasing each other like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Carter threw spaghetti on the floor. Marcus told a terrible joke that made everyone groan. Delilah rolled her eyes, but smiled anyway, and Gregory looked around the table with an expression of pure contentment. "I love you all," he said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. "I know I don't say it enough, but I do. You're my everything." Delilah reached over and squeezed his hand. "We love you too, Dad." Mariah felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were happy tears, grateful tears, because they'd made it. They'd survived the worst and come out the other side stronger. And as she looked around the table at the people she loved most in the world, Mariah realized something. This was what family looked like. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and worth fighting for, no matter what it cost. 5 years later, Mariah stood in her backyard in Lake Oswego watching Carter chase fireflies with his little sister, 3-year-old Naomi. The evening air was warm, the smell of barbecue drifting from the grill where Gregory stood, flipping burgers and laughing at something Marcus said. Delilah was setting the picnic table, Marcus helping her, their hands brushing in that casual, intimate way of people who build a life together. They'd gotten married 2 years ago, a small ceremony on the Oregon coast that Mariah and Gregory had helped plan. And just last month, Delilah had shared the news that she was pregnant, a baby girl due in December. The circle was complete. The wounds had healed. Not overnight, not without effort, but slowly, painfully, beautifully, they'd found their way back to each other. Mariah thought about that day at the altar, the day she'd married Gregory while Delilah sat stone-faced in the pews. She thought about the years of silence, the letters that went unanswered, the night she'd cried herself to sleep wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. And she thought about this moment, this perfect, messy, ordinary moment where everyone she loved was together, laughing and whole. It hadn't been a mistake. It had been the hardest, bravest decision of her life, and it had been worth it. Gregory called everyone to the table, and they gathered around, passing plates and pouring drinks. Carter insisted on sitting next to Auntie Dee, and Delilah pulled him onto her lap, making silly faces that sent him into fits of giggles. Mariah watched them and felt her heart swell. This right here was what she'd fought for. Not the wedding, not the house, not the life that looked good on paper. This, the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of a family that had been broken and chose to rebuild. Gregory raised his glass and everyone quieted. "I want to make a toast," he said, his voice steady and strong, so different from those uncertain days after surgery. To family, to second chances, to the people who refuse to give up on each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He looked at Delilah, then at Mariah, his eyes shining. "I'm the luckiest man alive, not because I have money or success or any of that, but because I'm surrounded by people who love me despite my flaws, people who've forgiven me when I didn't deserve it, people who've taught me that family isn't about blood or rules or doing things the right way. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other over and over, even when the world tells you not to." He turned to Mariah. "You saved me. You saw me when I was invisible, and you loved me when I thought I was too broken to be loved. Thank you for taking a chance on an old man with too much baggage." Mariah's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Best decision I ever made," she said. Gregory turned to Delilah. "And you, sweetheart, you had every right to walk away, to cut us out of your life and never look back, but you didn't. You came back. You forgave us. And you taught me that love isn't about holding grudges. It's about letting go. Thank you for giving us another chance." Delilah wiped her eyes, her voice thick when she spoke. "I'm glad I came back. I'm glad I didn't miss this." She looked at Mariah, and for the first time in years, there was no trace of anger or resentment in her eyes. Just love. Complicated, hard-won, real love. "I'm glad you're happy, Mariah. I'm glad you found each other, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." Mariah reached across the table and took Delilah's hand. "You're here now. That's all that matters." They raised their glasses, adults and toddlers alike, sparkling cider for the little ones, and clinked them together. "To family," Gregory said. "To family that echoed, and in that moment, surrounded by the people she'd fought so hard to keep, Mariah felt something she'd been chasing her whole life. Peace, not the absence of struggle, but the presence of love strong enough to weather it. Not perfection, but grace. Not a fairy tale, but a real, messy, beautiful life. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. That night, after everyone had gone home and the kids were asleep, Mariah and Gregory sat on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Mariah asked. "Any of it?" Gregory pulled her closer. "Not for a second, do you?" Mariah thought about the question, really thought about it. She thought about the girl she'd been at 19, sleeping in her car, feeling invisible and worthless. She thought about the woman she'd become, a social worker, a mother, a wife, someone who'd fought for her place in the world and won. She thought about the price she'd paid. Delilah's anger, the judgment, the guilt that still surfaced sometimes in the quiet moments. And she thought about what she'd gained, a family, a home, a love that had reshaped her understanding of what was possible. "No," she said finally. "I don't regret it. I'd do it all again." Gregory kissed the top of her head. "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Mariah said, "I think we're going to be okay. All of us. We already are," Gregory said. And he was right. They were okay. More than okay. They were whole. Not because they'd avoided pain or taken the easy road, but because they'd walked through fire together and came out the other side holding hands, because they'd chosen love over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, family over everything else. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Years would pass. Carter would grow up strong and kind with his mother's heart and his father's steady hands. Naomi would become a firecracker, all sass and sweetness, bringing joy wherever she went. Delilah's daughter, when she was born, would complete the circle. 3 kids who'd grow up knowing that family was complicated and messy and worth every second. There would be more challenges, health scares, financial struggles, moments of doubt, but they'd face them together because that's what family does. They show up, they fight, they forgive, they choose each other over and over, even when it's hard. Mariah would look back on her life one day when she was older, wiser, surrounded by grandchildren who asked her to tell the story of how she met Grandpa Gregory, and she'd tell them the truth, that love doesn't follow rules, that sometimes the most beautiful things grow from the messiest soil, that choosing to love someone despite the cost is the bravest thing you can do, and that at the end of the day, the only question that matters is this: did you love well? Did you fight for the people who mattered? Did you show up when it was hard? For Mariah, the answer was yes. 1,000 times yes. And that made all the difference. The fireflies danced in the darkness, tiny lights flickering like hopes and dreams refusing to die. Mariah watched them, feeling Gregory's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. This was her life, her family, her love story, and it was beautiful. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. And real, messy, complicated love, the kind that survives betrayal and judgment and years of silence, was the only kind worth having. So Mariah closed her eyes, held her husband close, and whispered a prayer of gratitude to the universe for second chances, for forgiveness, for the courage to choose love, even when the world said not to, and for the family she built from the broken pieces of her past, a family that proved every single day that love, real love, always finds a way, always, no matter what.